Welcome to our viewers this afternoon. I'm calling to order this meeting of the school committee on April 12th at 5:06 p.m. And thank you to everyone for joining us a little bit early today, because we do have several members who have to join another meeting later on tonight. So I will just read through our agenda. We have communications from the school committee and the administration, followed by public comment, followed by consideration of the ratification of the OT-PT contract, reports and discussion items, including a review of updated town meeting articles, the interim superintendent formative review, school committee workshop update, and then action items, including a consideration of the superintendent contract, consideration to reappoint Geeta Mathalayalakan to the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee, the EFPBC, a Network for Social Justice micro grant for $1,225 for Winchester Public Schools, and a Winchester Rotary Club grant for $2,000 to the Winchester High School Music Department, followed by the chair report, interim superintendent report, future agenda items, next meetings, and adjournment. So we will now move into our communications. Dr. Hackett, did you have anything to start us off with?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one for this evening. This is really informational, not for discussion, but I did come across the list of ARPA funding requests that the town has in front of the school board has in front of it. I don't have any more information on the process or when any kind of timelines as to when decisions will be made, but I thought just as for your information, it would be good if you have not seen this, so that you can see all the requests that the town will have to contemplate. So that's it for me.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Hackett, I understand we have a new registrar.
We do. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, she began yesterday. We're very excited. It's really wonderful to see the central office team joining together to make sure she has what she needs to kick off her start here at the Winchester Public Schools in a great way.
That's great.
And for the first time this year, we're almost fully staffed.
You know what?
Okay, so I'll settle down. All right. It's
getting there.
I don't know why we go for this year. It's almost June. Let's just push it into next year.
It's all good.
It is
We're
exciting.
so much closer.
That's
It
right.
is great to have someone on board. There's a lot of work done by Aaron, in fact, kind of pick up the slack.
Thank you to Aaron.
Hear that also.
Katarina, as well as Andrew. I mean, everyone's kind of hands on deck to kind of work through. The good news is that everyone kind of got to review the process, and we're able to kind of make some changes to the process. And we will be, we were hopefully next year we'll be moving to an online registration system. So something to look forward to. So
Very exciting. And then I guess we also have kindergarten orientation. I feel like we mention this each time, but it is coming up April 29th across the district. So please keep that in mind. Any other communications or anything from committee members, subcommittees, anything? Mr. Brady.
Just congratulations to the track teams. I happened to be out last Friday evening on a run, and I came across their meet, and I saw the 200 and the 2 mile, and I was very impressed. So just a kudos to them. And another reminder for folks who might still need to register for kindergarten, you can do it. And some of us are still working on our paperwork. I'm still trying to prove my residency in Winchester, so that's what I'm working on. So I'll get that in, and then Calder will be registered, and we'll go from there. So it's okay if you haven't signed up yet. The sooner you do it, the better. So please sign up, and please come to the orientation if you can. That's a great opportunity as well.
Yes, Mr. Nixon.
Congratulations to the High School Latin Club for winning the Junior Classical Lead State Convention.
Oh, that's wonderful.
State champs.
Nice.
That was over the weekend.
Yes. And our National History Day participants who were in the state competition, which was on home turf at Winchester High School. It's also very exciting. We got to see some of the exhibits. So, all good news,
Lots of
all
stuff
good
going
stuff.
on.
Gonna say,
Yes.
Lots
Feels
of
like-
talented kids in lots of areas.
Yeah.
Feels like a little bit like we're getting to normal, so.
Yes, very exciting. So, okay. Now we'll just move on to public comment. We have no registrants for remote public comment, and I don't believe we have anybody in the room or in the hallway for in-person public comment. So I will just move on over that. And the first order of business that we will take up this evening is consideration of the ratification of the OT-PT contract, which we have in our packets. Any comments, or else I would accept a motion to ratify? Yes.
I
Mr.
just
Brady.
wanted to thank everybody who participated in this process. So Karen and Frank and Lori and everyone, all of the OTs and PTs and Cheryl and David. It was certainly a lot of work, but I think it was good work, and I think we got to a really positive result. And so I just want to, again, thank everybody who participated in the process, and just appreciate all the time that we dedicated. And so I'm happy to make a motion to ratify it as it appears.
Second.
All in favor? Yes, Mr. Nixon.
Can somebody just also offer for clarification, we're able to do this today because the WEA,
Yes.
they ratified. Can
Yes.
somebody speak to
Yes.
that as a procedural item?
So the WEA did ratify this agreement on Thursday, I believe, was the final vote tally, and it was overwhelming.
It was. Yes, so very appreciative for their support as well.
Absolutely.
All in favor?
I think we need a roll
Aye.
call.
Of a roll call vote.
Yep.
Mr. Brady is aye.
Aye.
Mr. Nixon?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The vote is unanimous. And I too would just say a big thank you to the OT-PTs, our WEA reps, and Dr. Hackett and the administration, and our negotiations subcommittee for working so diligently on this. And we are just so pleased with the outcome and the resolution. So, thank you very much. Next, we will have the reports and discussion items, and beginning with a review of the updated town meeting articles, which Mr. Nixon will provide an update.
Oh, I didn't know you were throwing it to me.
A big
So-
punt.
Why don't we start off, I'll take them in numerical order. Can we go to Article 6? Is somebody
Yes.
prepared to throw that up on the screen, or do we just?
We don't have the
We
screen.
don't,
We
we
do
are
not
having
have the
technical
screen.
problems.
Oh, well, that's too bad.
I have, yeah.
We agree.
Okay, so I think Dr. Hackett had shared with you previously, Article 6 is the Wellfield transfer. This is a select board article. I haven't seen the motion language yet, but somebody who is in the know told me the motion language basically mimics the article itself. There's a map that calls out, it's about a 4-acre parcel. We're all familiar with it. It's necessary for the MSBA to vote on the preferred option. The select board reads their article anyway, but they still formally took they recommended favorable action on a chunk of articles last night, including Article 6, so we appreciate that. And because it's really essential for the Lynch project, I would suggest to this committee it would be helpful for us to signal some support for Article 6 as well. So that none of these are teed up as action items, so I think we're doing that at the next meeting. But I, again, just want to say how much I appreciate their support for this. We can also just share with the committee that VHB has been hired to evaluate the administrative process of decommissioning the wells. They've come up with some cost estimates, and that work is already underway in terms of sort of procedurally, because these wells were abandoned, I think, in like 1959 or 1960. So there's some administrative paperwork and processes that folks need to go through, and that is underway, and that is a Lynch project expense, but it's not onerous or anything. And the MSBA, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, they asked for a little more information, Dr. Hackett, on sort of what the status was, what the process was, and they were pleased to know that this was on the spring warrant. So we will certainly, I'm sure, let them know once town meeting votes on this, because we need to transfer that. Yep.
Okay.
So what else? We want to talk about Article 26 and 27, which is for Lynch swing space. So past week and a half has been a little bit of a blur, so I'm going to look to the chair of the superintendent to help sort of remind me of the latest update we've given here in terms of how these are structured. At the strong urging of both bond counsel and the comptroller and the interim town manager, we took the scope for the design and procurement package for the modular classrooms out of the first article. So the way these are presented, Article 26 deals specifically with the carriage house. Article 27, and let me just pause. Article 26 is seeking approximately $6 million, it's like $5.8, $5.9 million, call it 6, to complete the construction documents for the carriage house and actually do the work so that we can move central office over there. That's Article 26, and that's all that's in Article 26. Article 27 is not directly for anything that's actually that involves construction. It's simply about $170,000 for a design and procurement package that would be put together by TAP A and Hill for modular classrooms up here on the Parkhurst site. And the best way I can describe this to folks is for those of us born in a certain year who enjoyed choose your own adventure books in middle school, that's kind of what this is going to be like for town meeting. So Article 27, what we're asking for at 170, it doesn't really matter whether or not Article 26 passes or fails. If Article 26 fails, the goal we have heard clearly from Dr. Hackett and your task force, and certainly there's been strong interest here at this table as well, is to get all the kids off site at Lynch. So Article 27 seeks to do this, but with more modular classrooms. TAP A, and this will be explained at town meeting, even though the scope of that temporary work is greater, it doesn't really represent a significantly heavier lift for TAP A or for Hill. So for instance, if you have to design a supplemental parking lot, there's a cost for that. The fact that you have to make it a little bigger is, maybe a little more work, but only marginally so, right? The biggest sort of expensive effort in all of this is actually from the modular classroom manufacturers. They prepare shop drawings that actually constitute construction documents. And since they own that as part of the process, it's why TAP A and Hill have been willing to say, it doesn't matter. The 170 is the same, whether it's option A or option B. So hopefully that kind of makes sense to the committee. So we have a preferred option, we have a backup option. The preferred option requires the passage of Article 26 and 27. If 26 should pass, we have fewer modulars on site. If Article 26 should fail, we have more modulars on site. And Dr. Hackett has, some work to do in terms of kind of planning and figure out who goes where, and you've talked about that at previous meetings. But what I like about this approach is, and this came from an EFPBC member last month, was this idea of going to town meeting and not presenting one option, but really two. So we have a preferred option and we have a backup. So that's 26 and 27. There is another article, which I think is 28, and I'm looking, I don't know if Ms. Bergstrom knows for sure, I think it's 28. The select board has a policy that they voted about 4 or 5 years ago that says when we do major school expansion projects, they look for some supplemental funding for what they called at the time a school traffic safety study. And they look sort of beyond the local sort of bounds of the project to go between 1/10 and as much as 1/4 of a mile away from the project to see what sort of remedial work can be done to support the flow and the safe flow of pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular traffic. So a really good example of that was all the work that was done at McCall Middle School, right in front, Main Street in Washington, and around the corner where Mystic Valley Parkway was narrowed. So this came directly out of their policy. And that was not cheap work. I think we added about $500,000 to the McCall request at the time, which got a lot of it done, but not all of it. There was, and I don't know if Ms. Bergstrom remembers, there was some supplemental funding that was required. It was probably $750,000-ish to do that work. And the consequence has really been terrific. So the select board is looking once again to develop some scope of work. And they have, so that's what I believe it's Article 28 seeks to do, is just to procure some design monies. Now, of course, we don't know yet what the Lynch project is really going to look like. It is really significant if we're able to get all the kids off site for obvious reasons. So my understanding is that they would look to get this funded in the spring and then let Tool Design work with the architect and OPM on Lynch, and then be able to come back in the fall to town meeting and kind of describe broadly what sort of improvements they would look to make. And that would be a discussion for fall town meeting. That's how I understand it, but I wonder if others have a different understanding.
Me as well.
Okay.
Good summary.
Have school committee members seen this article, or do you have this article? It's pretty short. It says to see if the town will appropriate a sum of money for the preliminary engineering services for traffic improvements associated with Lynch Elementary School project and in surrounding neighborhoods, and to determine whether this appropriation shall be from free cash or other available funds, or take any other action in relation thereto. So that's my question, Mr. Nixon, is it sounds like they're not quite sure how they're going to fund it yet?
Sorry, Michelle, it's the same one that was in the motion book, right? They
Yeah.
haven't updated it. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
not yet.
I think you're right, because it remains, so they're just seeking design money.
Yep,
And in fact, it's between $75,000 and $77,000 that I believe they're asking for.
right.
Don't hold me to that, but it's something in that ballpark. So I think they want Tool to get the work done and then to come back with recommendations. And then, of course, they'll have some discussion about
How to fund that.
whether they want to do some of it or
Right.
all of it, or does some of it need to be done by the time Lynch opens? Does some of it wait? I mean, those are all conversations really for the board to have once they have information. So,
Can I just ask one clarifying question? So, assuming that the preferred option is getting all the students off of Lynch, and assuming that the preferred option of renovating the carriage house failed at town meeting, you mentioned there'd be more modulars here on site than the ideal option. Do we know that they'd all be here, or is there an option that they might be distributed at other schools?
It's a really good question. All options are on the table. That has not, that option, we want to keep Lynch students together. That's the primary goal. So we would first look to have the units on this site. The extent that we may need to think about, we've talked about this a little bit publicly, think about kindergarten maybe and preschool a little bit differently. That's still in play. And you know, we will know a lot more in September when our kids show up and we know how many kids are in front of us and what the sections look like as we project going into FY24. So it's still early, 24, right? It's still early, but all options will be on the table.
Okay. Yeah, I know there's a strong preference in the Lynch community that all the kids be together, which
Yep,
hence
here
the
too.
importance of the
I'm
preferred
feeling
option.
that pressure.
Yeah. No, and the preferred option of the carriage house enables that, but I also just wanted to have my eyes open and the community's eyes open that it might mean modulars landing at other places if that option weren't to pass.
Well, we can fit them all here, correct?
TAP-A has drawn out to 10.
16. We can,
Drawn
get,
to
16, I thought you
16?
heard.
we can get 16 modulars here. And the only thing I was going to
Oh,
say is
that's
there are a
right,
couple of
they do have a
utility
clause for
closets
that.
that would make a nice superintendent's office for a couple of years.
Well,
I mean, that's
so that
only
was-
fair, right? 960 square feet for a year and a half, then you just switch to
Absolutely.
something smaller.
I overindulged.
Yeah.
So
Well, I guess that was my question, following up on Mr. Hopcroft's, is why do we need more portables? Because even if the Article 26 fails, we could still have the priority of moving central office out of this space. It may just not be into carriage house. So we may not need more portables here, whether carriage house passes or fails. We would just have to come up with a plan B for finding someplace for central office to be, correct?
which could involve modulars as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And,
just-
and part of it's going to break on the question of kindergarten and preschool. I mean,
Right.
ideally, we'd get everybody here, right?
Right.
So TAP-A is drawn up to 16. I've seen, you know, we looked at 8. We talked about 10. You know, I think it's still a little bit early, but, you know, I would not, depending on what happens with central office, then that would drive those other potential modulars.
And just to Michelle's point, there will be a number of options. So as you know, Michelle said there's the option of moving central office somewhere else, and then there's the option of 16 modulars, and I think we have to have a balance of what's going to be financially the right thing, and then what's going to be the right thing for the best possible experience for the students who are
Right.
coming here, which is my priority. Even if maybe it costs a little bit more, I'd rather have them have the best experience. So I think we just need to know that all those will be factors depending on what the outcome is at town meeting.
Well, can I just pile on the back of that and say, with that better experience of keeping the kids together, we have some other kind of intangibles that are really important, like risk avoidance. Just having kids off-site during construction is a good thing.
Right.
You've heard Jay speak to the certainty from his point of view, and he's in the business, that we'll get more qualified bidders knowing the kids will be off-site. But to put a really fine point on this, so the EFPBC is bringing forward two different options. And the EFPBC is doing that because they are both very much sort of, they're known quantities. Like the EFPBC doesn't dwell on maybes and nice, would be nice and maybes or possibly. It's like, what can we control?
Right.
So the carriage house is district building, district land. We have some control over that. The same is true of Parkhurst. We know that MSBA they will not reimburse, but they will consider it an allowable project expense for modular classrooms. So the EFPBC can come to town meeting and say, if we can get central office out of Parkhurst, we only need 8 modulars, and there's a way to pay for those because they get rolled into the overall project expense. If central office is not moving out of here, then they're not moving out of here. The the MSBA isn't going to pay for us to rent space for Frank and his team for a couple of years.
But
So
MSBA is not going to pay for carriage house either.
that's right.
So either way, we're paying for someplace for central office to go.
According to the town manager, the debt service for 2 years on the carriage house is comparable to what we'd be paying to rent space for central office. So, we have a master plan that says you're here unless we want to send you to the carriage house.
Right.
So that's a long-term goal. If there's a way to do it, we do it.
Can we see that financial analysis? Like a document or something?
There's a lot of information we sent to FinCom, so why don't we ask Frank if there's something you can share?
I just like to see that,
Afterwards,
like the
yeah.
analysis of renting the space, because I haven't seen that. Sorry if I missed it.
No,
but-
it's okay. What I can tell you, so this was last done in 2017, and what we found at that time, so it was obviously lower project cost for obvious reasons, and lower interest rates. So it looked like the project was sort of hit the break-even point when you factored in things like fit-up and FF&E, kind of around year 19 or 20. So based on the higher construction cost or project cost today and higher interest rates, the break-even is further out. It's like towards the middle or end of year 24. But that document has been updated, so I think we can
Recently.
certainly share that information. Yeah, that was a request of Dr. Blackwell, actually. So that information has just sort of been updated. Yeah, anyway, did we answer your question? I got
Yes, and then some,
Distracted.
so thank you.
but the commitment is that we're going to get these kids off-site. And so both options, do that. There's going to be some, I think, operational creativity on Dr. Hackett's part about where all these kids are going to go. So you've got some work to do, but we kind of need to wait and see what town meeting says about what they support.
Yeah, and the work is in progress. We've had a lot of conversations about different options as to how it could look. I mean, there's ideally, and the first goal is to get all the kids, keep them together and keep them here. But there's also, if you just think about, and if you've had a chance to come here in the morning when preschool is dropping off, there are some logistical issues where we start talking about quite a few more kids than who we have in the preschool.
Right.
So there's, all of the questions around ideal situation also we have to factor in that many kids on this site and whether that's ideal in comparison to some other options. So as I said to you all, I believe at the last meeting, the intent is that we'll bring you some options to look at, get some feedback from you, and I don't know about this summer, but it would be early in the fall that we'd be prepared to really start rolling out some possibilities. So.
Well,
And
that was
when
going to be my, sorry, go
I
ahead,
was
Karen.
just going to say, when VO was here during 2011 to 2013. And we only had maybe like 220 students at the time. And still, traffic, I think, coming through this neighborhood was a big thing. So
Challenge.
Yeah, will
it was
we
a
be
challenge.
Will we be able to look at or have, some professionals give us some options if we say we're going to have X students coming, we're anticipating X vehicles? Can you tell us, I can't imagine what they'd tell us. Do we do a circle up here, or do we do a different drop off down there and we block the street? I mean, I have no idea, but are we going to be able to get some guidance on that rather than us just make it up?
From a process standpoint, yes, and TAP A has already done some of that work.
They've done some preliminary, and I briefly mentioned this at the last meeting. I thought when the select board first kicked around this idea of getting tool design to do some work, they were interested in finding a way to support us just during construction. Now, things that are literally on site, that's the responsibility of the project team. That's understood. But if there's some things that we can do beyond those borders to help, I think that would be really helpful. So maybe that's just a follow-up conversation, Frank, that you might have with Beth Rudolph.
I would think that the scope of Article 28 may allow you to do that, because it talks about the study at Lynch for construction, but this is going to be part of the Lynch construction project.
Yeah.
So there may be some flexibility within that, within Article 28 already, to allow us to do some of that. And two things. One is I would also like to look at transportation as part of that, and understanding, in the move both environmentally and in terms of traffic, what kinds of things we could offer in terms of maybe some more flexibility around busing, and more options for Lynch parents around busing that might make it more appealing to them to actually have the kids go on buses to come here, because that if it's not a great experience for parents dropping off, but it's a better experience to have the kids get on a bus, that may be appealing
Which
to them
could
as
very well be the case.
But I was going to say, we have time to talk about this, though, right?
We do.
Like,
Right.
we don't have it, even though these articles are on now, that's because we're being planful.
Right.
And there's still some time for us to plan around this. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
That's just asking for money to start doing the work.
Right.
Okay.
I
All
don't
right.
think there's anything else.
Yep. Okay. With that, we will move on to the next order of business, which is the interim superintendent formative review. And last year, school committee had revamped the timeline for the evaluation process, or for the evaluation cycle for the superintendent, so that it was more in line with the school year. So we had moved the formative evaluation up to March, and then the summative final evaluation back further to June. So Dr. Hackett had begun the process of providing an update on his goals for himself and for the district at our last meeting. And will be returning to it this afternoon to complete that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if, with the introduction, as you know, at the last meeting, I provided a PowerPoint. I don't necessarily feel the need to or want to go down through those slides. You have seen them, but just to say that, what I talked about at the last meeting was that there's been a lot of work that's been done around social emotional learning, and that work was done prior to the pandemic, thankfully. Whether you were predicting the pandemic or not, I don't know, but it was insightful and it was timely as we headed into the pandemic, that so much of that work has been done, from hiring SEL coaches to professional development, to even incorporating co-teaching, which provides additional adult support. That has been and it still remains a focus. As you know, going into the FY23 budget and part of the ARPA request, we have put in a request for 2 additional SEL coaches for next year, anticipating and knowing that we have experienced, our students have experienced it's not been a It's been a difficult couple of years, the transition back to school. We're seeing some behaviors that we haven't normally seen, and we just want to continue to make sure that we're providing the level of support we need to. But it's also in line with the pathway that had been set several years ago in the goal of trying to get an SEL coach in every elementary school. So hopefully we might be able to see some funding out of ARPA for that purpose. But when you go back and you kind of look at what the focus areas were when Dr. Evans was here, and just going back to 2016-17, which is on slide 2, the goal is, one of the goals was build a strong and effective system of supports and interventions to ensure that all students' social, emotional, and mental health needs are met. And part of that is in response to some of the data that's at the top of this slide that comes from the YRBS surveys, where students were indicating high levels of stress. And interestingly, and not surprisingly, when you look at the data and the percentages, it's the combination of schools and home that creating stress around academics. School demands and expectations was one of the highest. At Winchester High School, 42% of students expressed that anxiety and stress levels are driven by them. The main driver of that is school demands and expectations, as well as at the middle school at McCall, it was 37% also answered that that was the main driver for stress levels and anxiety. So the district, I think, the school system rightfully needs to continue to work on SEL and supporting our students, especially as we continue to come out of the pandemic and into next school year. So I provide that kind of by way of background, and don't need to go into the last couple of years. Obviously, every school system in the Commonwealth has had to really adapt and change to how we've been providing instruction, whether it was last year where we were full remote and combinations of hybrid, or coming back to school this year and being back in person full time. We have had to make a lot of adjustments, and I think, from my perspective, and I can still offer a little bit of an objective outside perspective, I think the district has done extremely well in that transition. And part of that is because of the planning that happened prior to, and the focus that, as I spoke to, around social emotional learning, and just making sure that as we re-entered students full-time, that we were focused on that and we were mindful of that. And that's also in line with the DESE guidance that had come out for the fall return, was that really make sure that you're focusing on relationships first with kids. So moving into the goals that you approved in December 7th, 21, and I can just read them quickly. Goal 1, develop and understand the values, hopes, and culture of the Winchester school community through building relationships and strengthening family and community engagement. Goal number 2, synthesize and evaluate Goal 1 data through a total child and equity lens to lead a collaborative process to consider the articulated vision, beliefs, and goals, setting the foundation for current work and for the future development of a strategic plan. Goal 3, through a distributive model of leadership, develop recommendations and implementation plans for improvements in organizational systems for key district performance areas. And Goal 4, to establish a framework for continuous improvement through thoughtful plan, engagement, and data and evidence-based programmatic review, development, implementation, and evaluation. So what you have in front of you tonight, because this is the formative focus is really on the goals that were set and that discussion and feedback for me on that. The summative would then bring in the actual evaluation rubric that you are all used to seeing. I think it's gone from 15 pages to 7 now. I'm not sure it's any more manageable, but that would be part of the summative evaluation. So what you don't have in front of you tonight, and you will have when I do the summative, or you do the summative with me, will be how I view my performance against the rubric. So I provided a printed copy of what is going to be a public dashboard. I don't know that I'm going to provide the subtasks on the public-facing dashboard, just because it's a lot. And also just to say that in trying to think about how do I provide evidence of what I've been working on, what we've been working on around the goals that have been set and the objectives, the subtask really started to become, that's me kind of sharing with you what I've done in trying to implement the goals and the objectives that have been laid out. So goal number 1, for example, just to kind of take it across the top, you'll see the goal statement itself. The status is an indicator of essentially where are we, if it's in progress, if it's ongoing, which means generally it would carry over into FY23, whether it's completed or delayed. The health indicator really is a indication of, in terms of that particular action step or that subtask, where am I with respect to the total timeline and the process and the quality with which we're doing it. So you'll see, for example, that action step line number 9, hold small group and individual meetings with town administrators to learn how the town functions. That's a goal that's in progress, or it's an action step that's in progress. The health indicator is green, because I believe that as earlier today, having conversations with town management around various issues, finance committee, the town. I just have had an opportunity to have a lot of interaction with town government, and that's been great because it's really helped me to understand where the town sees itself going, what the resources are, what the challenges are, as we kind of think forward over the next few years. So, again, not to run through all these with you, but does anyone have any just questions about just the structure and what you're looking at?
Yes, Mr. Nixon.
3 quick things. For things like on your page 1, line item 16, meet with elementary parents associations. So I know you've done it, but because they meet throughout the year,
Right.
some clarity here about, I mean, at the very least, you wanted to meet once, right?
Right.
And now they're on the back of
Right.
COVID.
Right.
Are you looking to do that again? You know, you've only got so much time in the day, but it would be helpful, particularly if you are going to publish the subtasks. And I know you were saying you might not, but this is the kind of thing that I think, sort of on a routine basis,
Right.
you might want to think about checking in.
Right.
You need to update line item 29. Bottom page 1.
Oh, hey, there we go. Wow.
I'm just want to
They won't make
say,
any assumptions, so yeah.
I was throwing you a curveball.
Sorry,
I
man.
meant that in a positive way.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask you, you had an item on here about visiting schools and class. Here we go, 36, conduct school and classroom visits. And I think this had been read in an earlier version we saw, and I know you're making progress on this. Can you just share with us, other than, I think we all understand what happens when a superintendent walks into a classroom, but what else are you looking for when you visit a school? Can you talk a little bit about what do you think it takes to really begin to understand the culture of a school? And is that really something you could get done by June 30th of 22? Because some superintendents take a while.
So, great questions. It's interesting that you pointed out the parent associations, because I went back and forth between marking that as ongoing, because it is ongoing.
Right.
In fact, I'm going to be at Lynch next week, I believe, at Williams Drop.
Yeah.
So
That's where I was coming from.
yeah, so that is ongoing and will continue to be ongoing. It was not intended to indicate that it was a one-time and then check the box. And I'm hoping to get to all of the parent associations one more time, if the schedule will allow for that. I've been pretty active with PISC. I've been at most all those meetings, which is really helpful, as you know, because it's not just the parent organizations, but it's also community-based organizations, and that has helped me both make connections, but also understand in a broader sense what kind of the values and the goals are of the town and the school community. So that's been extremely helpful for me. So, if there's just no question, first of all, just to say that there are many places that I've got work to do. And, I'm not here to make excuses about anything that's gone on. As you can see, this is a lot of stuff, and there's been some pretty heavy lifts here. But I have not been able to, or have not, gotten into the schools at the level that I would like to get into. And partly that's been kind of COVID related. One of the things that the leadership team has done here and scheduled or organized is that once every other month, leadership team will meet at a building, and we'll do a walkthrough of classrooms as a small group, and that's been fantastic. We've done several of those. The last one we were going to do was Lincoln, which was at the height of the variant that was coming through January. No, actually, I'm sorry. It was when we went to optional masking, and VO was when we went to optional masking, and the feeling was that teachers didn't need one more adult body in any kind of supervisory capacity going through the classroom. So, so that's been a really good structure and what I like about that structure is that it generates conversation among leadership, as opposed to me walking into a classroom and sitting in the back with a notepad,
Right.
which is, I think, maybe partly to your point. I believe that the most important role of a superintendent when it comes to school quality is working with principals, because the principals are the ones that, and assistant principals, are the ones that go into, you don't want it, yeah, you just don't want that. Are the ones that they affect the day-to-day life of students, and they affect the day-to-day life of staff, and they are the ones that really gauge the level of quality of instruction, where the challenges are, and what the growth areas are. So, to answer the question, I mean, I think we all can. You can get a sense of the culture of a building when you walk in. It definitely is going to take more time than what I've allotted here, and it never ends, candidly. But it has been helpful to to meet the parents, to just understand the culture of the community, and there are many things that I love about this place, and one of the things I just continue to be amazed at is just the level of support for education. I mean, it is just so clear in every meeting that I'm in that this community is dedicated and committed to providing the best quality public education that we can. And you can't coach that. As a leader, you can't change that entire culture within a community. If the roots aren't there, it's very difficult to work out of. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that, that's, in terms of feeling the culture, it's definitely going to take more time.
Multifaceted exercise.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So,
I just have a quick question.
absolutely.
So, there is, on the last page, the strategic plan has fallen off the list. Can you just talk a little bit about, I'm sure that was a thoughtful decision. We talked a little bit about it being a large lift at the beginning of the year. And could you just talk a little bit about why that's fallen off the list and what your vision is for that moving forward?
So, it was not intentional to fall off the list, but it is in
Isn't it
It's
there
only
on the
goal
last
2.
page?
It's pretty heavily covered in goal 2.
Yep.
So it hasn't fallen off the list, but as you look at goal 2, there's really not been progress specific from an action and subtask standpoint, because as you actually shared with me and helped me as we developed these goals, you kind of pulled me back on that particular item, which was was just the right thing to do. So as we approach the end of the school year, we do have a few things that are still going on from the budget. When we get through the budget from the Lynch project will continue. Obviously, we are going to be entering collective bargaining with all of our units as well. So what we would like to do, and partly on slide 5, you'll see what we'd like to recommend is a few things. One, you have an item on your agenda tonight about school committee workshop. I think that it's a good time to kind of regroup. As I shared with the WIFI board the other day, we're coming out of a pandemic, and we've been in pandemic schooling mode, and we've been trying to, we've been doing it well. And I don't say that from the standpoint of like we've not been doing anything else, because we have an incredible amount of work that's been going on. But I do think this is a good chance for us to just take a breath and think about where are we going for the next 5 years, and that kind of goes back to the beacons. So I don't know in exact order of operations, but I think for the school committee to have the workshop around norms and getting into the values, right, is a great starting point. And then one of the things that we would like to do, because this is part, obviously, of how we measure student performance and how we move forward with our students, and there's been just a tremendous amount of work done around building assessments that are performance-based assessments, is give the committee a chance to have more of an in-depth understanding of what those look like and what that process is, in four areas, and we're thinking 4 sessions. So formative assessments, common classroom assessments, common benchmark assessments, and external standardized and standards-based assessments would be kind of the 4 areas. Now, given the time of the year, we may not get through that all before the end of the year. Maybe that rolls into, the fall a little bit, but I think it's an important conversation as we think about what are our goals, how do we know we're accomplishing them, and most importantly, how are the goals that we are setting and the accomplishment of those goals helping our students in terms of their own achievement.
I really love that idea, and I really appreciate it. I think it's, the type of innovative thinking that you've been doing, and I'm really excited about it. I would strongly suggest we not do it at 5, because that's really a time that's pretty tough for people who are working and trying to get their kids. And yeah, they can watch it later, but it's tough. So I would just say it is important. Let's do it during our regular meeting at the regular time, not at an earlier time that's less accessible for people.
Noted. We just want to make sure that, I don't know whether the committee's, not to get into this logistical conversation tonight, but whether the committee's open to additional dedicated meetings just for this 45 minutes at a later time, and separating out from the business meeting, because I just get a little nervous about with everything we have to do that time will kind of get lost. But we can obviously work through.
No, that's a great idea too.
The later in the day makes more sense.
Yep.
Mr. Hopcroft, I thought you had something a little earlier.
Yeah, I was going to just share, I mentioned this at the last meeting, that, appreciating, Dr. Hackett, your formative evaluation, but in addition, you've been here 9 or 10 months on a 2-year interim contract with a stated desire to become a permanent superintendent. And, our responsibility as a committee is hiring and evaluating superintendents. And so, we've had a good chunk of time to get to know you. We as a new member of the committee, I've learned that you get a lot of interaction being on the committee and how much we do here. So we know you pretty well, and we've heard your formative self-evaluation. We wanted to really take a pulse of the community and understand how the community saw your interactions, how you're doing so far. And we were very appreciative and impressed that you welcomed this, and that you sent us off and said, talk to anyone you want. And so that was really was great. We set up a process to get community feedback, and over the course of a couple months, met with probably 40 or 50 leaders across the community, and leaders in the district, principals and assistant principals, administrative staff, central office, teachers union, et cetera. The parent community, we met with PISC and the parent associations and the foundations and WinPAC. Within the broader community, town and municipal leaders at various levels, including public health, public works, public safety, finance, engineering, planning, and management. So we were able to gather quite a bit of input from many constituencies, and I'm happy to say that it was overwhelmingly positive input. We asked everyone, and I'm not sure we have the ability to put up a word cloud here, but we did ask folks in all these meetings.
We were hoping to have the technology to have it.
Technology's not working.
Yes, we wanted to put the word cloud
We can always show
up.
the word
So-
cloud at the next meeting.
So-
We can.
Yes.
We can post
So,
it.
so just to say, in all of the meetings, we asked people to share a few adjectives, and we created a word cloud, which is quite interesting, which everyone here has seen, and people in the community will have an opportunity to see at some future time when that's available. And so, we had a lot of, as I say, great feedback, a few growth areas as well. We shared that all back with Dr. Hackett and appreciated his support in the process. I found it interesting also that how appreciative the community was that we reached out to them to have this conversation. And so, we were very appreciative of their, candor and input into the process, and they were very appreciative to be part of the process as well. So I thought, I wanted to share that, and I thought, Madam Chair, if it made sense, if members of the committee wanted to share any observations they had of the process or the outcome, that may make sense or not. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Sure.
I was gonna say, you look ready to jump in, Mr. Nixon.
You
Yes.
want me to start? So, yeah, I'm sorry we don't have the projector tonight, so I'm eager to share the word cloud with the community. So we were,
Maybe you
We
could
asked- we
give some of
asked-
the highlights.
I'm sorry?
Maybe you could
read a
give some
few
of the
of the loud
highlights,
words.
the big words.
That's where
exactly.
I'm going. So we did ask these folks, and I, forgive me, Mr. Hopcroft, I forgot like how many people we talked to, but it was maybe between 40 and 50 people, various community members, right, on the edge school side, town side, community leaders, and so forth. And we asked each of them to give us 3 adjectives to describe Dr. Hackett, and we were pretty insistent in pulling that out of them. And what was really interesting to me was some of the consistency that came back. Winchester School Committee is not going to have either a superintendent or interim superintendent at the table that isn't experienced. So we can find experienced superintendents. What I'm more interested in, I'm interested in the personality traits, someone who's a good leader, good sense of humor. And so as I was reflecting on, that output, the common traits that jumped out at me were things like thoughtful, approachable, personable, humorous, so sense of humor certainly very important in the job, collaborative, genuine, and supportive. Those were really strong responses. But we really were clear on our expectations with folks that we wanted to hear everything. So it could be critical, and we welcome that as well. And so there were some areas for growth, and I think it speaks to something you were talking about a few minutes ago, Dr. Hackett, needing to be in the classroom more, literally just being more physically present, being more visible. And so I was appreciative that you had acknowledged that in an earlier presentation to us on the formative. There was one huge surprise in here, which is that he likes potato chips, and I was not aware of that. So if anybody wants to try to curry favor with you, bring a bag of Lay's potato chips or whatever your favorite brand is.
Don't eat them.
But don't eat them. He can only eat his own.
And that I believe that came pretty quickly as well, how much he likes potato chips. So anyway, this is a kind of an unusual thing that we did. This, typically the formative and summative evaluation process that's prescribed by DESE that every school committee goes through is an annual process. And so, Dr. Hackett, I just want to say thank you for being willing to, let us go and talk to the community. We've discussed this amongst ourselves somewhat in executive session without you being present. You had a right to be there. You said, go ahead, talk about me all you want. And so I really appreciate that. I think that speaks to the trust that's developing here across the table. So I, too, was really just pleased with the feedback that I heard, and glad we went through this process.
Yes, Ms. Bergstrom.
I just wanted to highlight actually some of the smaller words, because when we went out looking for an interim superintendent a year ago, we certainly didn't intend to find an experienced sitting superintendent to be able to fill that role for us. And certainly one who had not necessarily experienced the ups and downs of the pandemic with a school district, with teachers, with staff. And I can't underestimate how powerful that's been for you in working with the staff this year. And some of the smaller words that came back were things like brave and positive energy, and that you were supportive, and coming out of a pandemic where we saw a staff that frankly was a little bit at times demoralized and really just had a rough year themselves. I just want to say that what I've appreciated and what I saw other people appreciate in their feedback to us about you is just sort of the coming back to life that has happened in the school district this year, and people excited about the work that they're doing and excited to be able to move on sort of back to normal, but also be able to move forward and be able to think about ideas to meet kids' needs again and not be struggling with just the day-to-day. And I think the energy that certainly came out of this and some of the words that people used to describe you when we were in one-on-one conversations, in the small group conversations with them, just were really powerful in the kind of leadership that you've brought to the district this year. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Comments? I guess I would just reiterate what Mr. Nixon was saying, that I really appreciated the opportunity and that you were very generous in just saying, feel free to reach out to whomever you would like. And I believe that people in the community whom we had reached out to were indeed very grateful for that chance, and they expressed that. And it's something that I've been interested in previously, to have this 360-degree feedback. So I think that's very important. And I'd just say it's been a great pleasure to work with you over the last 9 months. And as Ms. Kirby was saying, and maybe Mr. Nixon was saying, or actually maybe it came from over here. I cannot remember.
It's okay.
Yes. When we started the process a year and a half ago of looking for an interim superintendent, we were looking for steady leadership, and we weren't expecting to have a sitting superintendent come and join us. And I think with Dr. Hackett, we've gotten so much more. We've gotten this leadership, the steadiness, to keep us going through the waters of COVID and everything in a crazy year. But we've also gotten so much more. I think that you have inspired confidence, because you play by the trust that you place in your team. And that you've been very focused on a data-driven and thoughtful approach, and thinking strategically and collaboratively, when we want where we want to be in the district in the upcoming years, and with a sense of humor we very much value, and with respect to some of the smaller words that Ms. Bergstrom was talking about on the word cloud, the one that I remember most is that you've been called an ally. People trust you, and can come to you, and still find support from you. So I think that these have been reflected clearly in the voices of the administration and the town officials, the community organizations, the staff, and the leadership whom we had spoken with. And this is just within the 9 months that you've been here. Starting anew, steering us through negotiating contracts, through return to school, through steering us through this budget season, and with the Lynch School building project. I think these have all been big challenges for us over the school year. So I have no doubt that you will continue to reach out to the staff and the community, and to build and strengthen these relationships in our community, so that our children will have the educational experience that you've been described, that is focused on their unique needs that you've described in your goals. So I've just been very excited about that.
Thank you.
Well, I have a few thoughts on our process. First, I'll echo Karen that, I think a 360-degree review is very valuable, and I would hope that, as I've heard from everyone, that it was valuable, that it's something we can continue with going forward. I don't think it's a one-time thing. I think it helps, and it's how you get the best feedback when you're talking to everyone who somebody works with, both people that they supervise and people who work closely with them and people who are more distant than from them, because you get a totally different perspective. I'll have a different take in that, as a school committee, it's our responsibility to talk to anyone that you work with, so we didn't really need your permission. I certainly appreciate your permission, and I think I would have been quite concerned if
You had my
said
blessing.
if you'd said
Fuck
no.
that. Fuck that.
So irregardless, I was very glad that we did that, and I appreciate my fellow members of the committee. I definitely pushed to make it pretty broad and pretty wide, and it did take a lot of time. I think it's worth noting the amount of time we spent speaking with people and throughout this process. I don't think a lot of school committees probably spend the same amount of time on something like that. Maybe they do. I don't know. I haven't heard of it. So I think that's impressive in its own regard that we dedicated our time to doing that. and I think it got a really great outcome. I think we got a very good sense of what you've been able to accomplish in your time, and where you're going. And so that was very exciting for me to see. I'll also echo, I think your relationships that you've built with people really stand out. And I think I know that's the most important thing in education, is those relationships. You're not going anywhere or getting anything done unless you have strong relationships with people. So for me, that was the most important, and I was just very pleased to see that. And I think another thing that I want to highlight is my observation of you as a leader is you know when to step forward, but you also know when to step back, and you're pretty open to acknowledging when you don't know something, and that's pretty rare. So I've worked with my fair share of superintendents. I've been doing this about 20 years now, so different parts of the country. I know a lot of my friends and former colleagues are superintendents, so I have a pretty broad view of it, and you've definitely impressed me, and I think for me, again, that key is that there are areas that you want to keep improving in, and I believe that you're going to do that. I know you're not just saying it because I know you at this point, so I know you're going to do it, and I've seen you do it, and I really appreciate that, and that to me is exciting. I think you and I went over some of the feedback. It's been echoed here, so I'm not going to belabor any of it, but just the idea of getting into the classes more, meeting more of the teachers, some of the communications, just having them be more direct from you, just so people kind of have that touch point. I think that will definitely, again, I know that you do well building those relationships, so it's kind of a, the power of yet. You're not there yet. I know you're going to do it once you do it, so it's just a matter of doing it. And I'm really excited too about this last piece here on your goal worksheet, planning steps related to equity supported by the new revised strategic plan. So that's kind of the next big piece. And I appreciate that. Yeah, it's not started yet, and you shouldn't have started it yet, because you're just kind of getting there. Before you really put that in place, I would want you to have all the data from a school year. So if you came to me and said this plan's done already, I'd be worried. I'd say, why? You don't know how the students did across the course of the year. You don't know how things are looking going forward. So again, I just have to say I really think we as a school committee did a great process, and I think it's yielding a very positive result. I don't think there's any other way we could have determined that you were doing well, and I think you've definitely shown that you're doing well. And obviously, as you know, we receive almost every email and every comment, whether it's well or not well, but certainly I think the wells, as Ms. Tom mentioned, the wells far outnumber the not as wells. And again, I think I'll just close with that. I think for me, that's the most important part. It's clear that as the leader, you still want to learn, and that's important to you, and I think you're modeling that, and I hope people see that. If they don't, I hope they get a chance to see it, because I've certainly seen it throughout a number of things we've been working on together. So I just want to thank you for the work you've done, and I think you know the areas that you're going to work on, and again, I'm excited to see that work. And again, we're certainly all here to support you. I hope you know that and feel that. But again, at the end of the day, we are your 5 supervisors, and that's our job. So if you need something and you don't have it, if we could do something better, please, let us know, because that's our responsibility as well. And I want to make sure that we're living up to it. And I think you felt supported, but obviously if in any aspects you haven't, let us know, because we can do better too, and we can get better, and I think we're trying to do that, and we share that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, any more comments on the formative assessment?
Only just to say that I really appreciate the time that you spent. I know how much time you spent. It's a whole different deal to go down and go somewhere to someone's office, to someone's classroom, and sit down and have a face-to-face or mask-to-mask conversation with someone, to be able to have that person be able to respond to and really give them the floor and just kind of set the, the adjective. I love the adjective approach. I'm glad that people felt free to say both good things and things that they'd like to see me work on. This has been the longest interview I've ever gone through. I feel, as I expressed in the initial process, I see myself here. I'd love to be here. I think the work that lies ahead is exciting. I absolutely feel supported by this committee and by the staff and central office. So I look forward to continuing the work over the coming months to close out this school year and then really kind of teeing up what lies ahead. So I very much appreciate the feedback. And to your point, Mr. Brady, you're going to hear feedback on me, whether I give you a blessing or give you permission or not. I like the idea that you went out and sought feedback from people that you might not otherwise have heard from. And gave them real face time, which also I know made them feel valued, just not even part of this process, but that they have a school committee members sitting in front of them having an opportunity to have a conversation is pretty rare. And I will say, to your point, Mr. Ray, I've never seen this done anywhere. Probably exists somewhere, but I've not seen it done by school committees or even read about it being done by school committees. So I do appreciate it very much.
I'm glad it was a good process for you too, because that's important feedback as well.
Yeah, very helpful. Much more helpful than the 120 indicator rubric.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's coming. So, okay. Well then, with that, I will just move us on to the next item, which is, I believe we are having a
Workshop
discussion on the workshop. And this is, I think Dr. Hackett had referred to this, a norms workshop for the school committee. We are planning this in the upcoming weeks for all of us, and it will be a workshop that touches on our values, the direction we'd like to pursue as a committee, and where we see us going over this coming year. And Ms. Bergstrom and Dr. Hackett have been working on the logistics for this session, so we will have more information to come. But if you'd like to say anything, then...
I think that's pretty good. We're just reaching out to some people that have been recommended to us as facilitators. We thought it was important to have an outside facilitator be able to work with us, and because it's a lot of big ideas that we'll be talking about, and we want to be able to have honest conversations with each other. So we'll be looking for someone who we think can facilitate those kinds of conversations. And if anybody has any feedback on that or something you'd like to see, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Hackett and let him know too as we plan that, because it's not my workshop or Ms. Bolognese's workshop or Dr. Hackett's workshop, but all of ours. So it needs to be something that we all value and buy into, because again, it will be another use of our time. So we want to make sure we're using that time well.
So one thing I just want to pile on that I think I had mentioned in the reorg meeting that I hope we're able to touch on is some conversation around the action items or issues that members are particularly interested in and sort of willing to really step up and lead on or engage in some way. And those that are not the case. There may be some things that members just either they feel they don't have the expertise in, the particular interest in, or time for. We've had conversations like that in the past, and that's really important. Some prior school committees have found sometimes that there were 4 members who felt passionately about one thing, but there were 3 really important things that nobody was really raising their hand for. So, but they all needed some measure of, guidance or support, if you will, from a school committee member. So that's kind of a running the railroad thing, but I do think that's important for us to talk about as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions about the workshop? Okay. So it is 6:15, and we can move into the action items. So the first of which is a consideration of the superintendent contract. So perhaps Mr. Nixon and Mr. Hopcroft, you could give us just a brief update.
Well, so as the committee knows, and we'll remind the community, Dr. Hackett is officially our interim superintendent of schools. He was hired on a 2-year contract that expires June 30th, 2023. Dr. Hackett did express very clearly to the committee at the time and to the public during his interview process his interest in staying here long term. So to your point a moment ago, this is the longest job interview you've ever had. And so Mr. Hopcroft and I, deputized by the school committee, have had some conversations with Dr. Hackett about what he might be looking for in a long-term contract. And similarly, we've kind of represented to him what the committee would be looking for in a long-term contract as well. So we've reached a tentative agreement that is a 3-year agreement that would start on July 1st, basically cut his existing interim deal in half with 2 consecutive 1-year options, and along with various benefits language that's very much sort of commensurate with the prior long-term superintendent of schools. I turn over to Mr. Hopcroft if he has anything he wants to add, but I'd be happy to make a motion when the chair is ready for it. But what does Tom think?
Yeah, I think you described that well. It effectively, brings you on as a full-time superintendent, as of this summer. We take the side letter as a separate. Take the side letter as a separate item.
So we have one motion that would deal with the contract and also an amendment to his existing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'd be happy to make the motion to if people are ready to approve the contract.
I just have a comment before the motion.
Go ahead. Make a comment.
Thanks. So, I think it's important for the community to know that, we could have approached this in all different manners. We could have done a full search. We could have taken smaller scale approaches, and we didn't do that. And I just want to say I was a person who felt that we should do a search, but at the same time, I felt that if we did a search, you probably would be the candidate. You would come out. So if we put you up against the best people that were going to apply, I think you still would have come out on top. So I think that's just worth saying. And yeah, is there a chance you wouldn't have? Sure. Maybe there's a 1 in 100 chance you wouldn't have. But I think I felt a high level of certainty that if we had done a search, you would have come out on top. So I think that's just important to say, because I'm sure some folks might not understand why we didn't do a search, because that's what they might be used to. And again, as I said, there are a lot of different ways to do it. Sometimes superintendents just get appointed with almost no process. So there's a whole spectrum, and people only know what they know. But I think it's just useful to say that their school committees can do it almost any way they want. Legally, they have a wide way of doing it. We could have done this whole search and brought in people and interviewed them. We could have had a public interview with you. But what we did was we talked to everyone you work with, basically, and that gave us the impression, and we went from there. So I think that's just I want everyone to understand that who wasn't part of the process, because I don't think we necessarily have communicated that up to this point. So that was just the comment I wanted to make.
So I'd be happy to make a motion to welcome Dr. Frank Hackett as the district's new superintendent of schools, to approve a new 3-year contract beginning July 1st, 2022, with 2 1-year options as negotiated, and to authorize the chair to execute an amendment to Dr. Hackett's current contract of employment, lifting the interim title effective immediately.
Second.
Third.
Fourth.
All,
Do roll call.
yes, all in favor, and I was going to say we need a roll call vote for this. So Mr. Nixon?
Aye.
Yes. Ms. Bergstrom? Mr. Brady?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Hopcroft? The chair votes aye, and the vote is unanimous. And, yes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
I feel like it just got real.
You look different too. Now.
I feel like you're gonna get a whole bunch of bags of chips delivered to you.
But don't get too excited because you're not there yet.
Madam Chair, can we
Right.
take just like a 2 or 3 minute break? I have to.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Of course.
We're well ahead of time, and
yes.
we think we'll stay that way.
I was
so-
just going to say that I'm excited and I'm looking forward to this very fruitful partnership between you and within the community. And there is a lot of flux with some of our positions in town and then in the administration. So I just appreciate having the steadiness and your leadership and vision going forward. So I'm so excited to see this happen and for all of us and in the community. So thank you.
And you
And
don't need to thank me.
congratulations.
I'm thrilled and honored to be able to be actually the new superintendent. And you know, I too look forward to the work. And the good thing is we've already gone through some of the growing pains, and we know each other, and the relationships are there. So I just think that we've got nowhere to go but up. I mean, I just think we can really launch and just I think make a real contribution to the students in Winchester over the next coming years. So I appreciate your confidence and your support. Thank you.
Now you get to face all those DESI rubrics with superintendent after your name.
Yes.
So you have that to
That's
look
right.
forward
I have that to
to.
look forward to. I don't know if it helps me with Desi, but yes. Thank you.
I would echo Ms. Bolanese' comment about having sort of a steady hand on the tiller during times of great change. Yeah, there's a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces between the pandemic, the building project, the contracts. There's just a lot happening, and so it's reassuring to have to have someone with your experience driving the ship. There is I was just alluding to the fact that you're still interim until July 1st. And so that we do have another piece of business
Nope.
now.
Nope,
Oh,
we just did
did-
that.
Effective immediately.
Do we do the side letter?
Yeah, he
Oh,
did that in his
never mind.
motion.
It's done.
He did it.
It's done. Thank you.
It's
Okay, I
done.
missed that.
Yeah.
I got demoted and promoted again. It was, whoa.
I had that as a second vote, but that's okay.
You're like,
Thank you.
So do we need to take a recess for a couple of minutes?
Yes, I
Yes.
think it was a recess.
So moved?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Is there a reason we have the air conditioning on?
I don't know why the air conditioning's on. I'm dying. It's so cold.
No, it's like glass.
What happened?
Cold. It turned on while Chris was
Yeah.
talking.
I'll turn it off. I just want to make sure there wasn't a
No,
reason.
well, there wasn't. No.
I was wondering if you guys were able to hear over there with it on. It's the
Suddenly
worst.
kicked in.
You could just open the windows. It's probably warmer
mysterious phantom.
outside.
It probably is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna run to the ladies' room if
Few more items to go. Next is a consideration to reappoint Geetha Mathalayalakan to the EFPBC. You do have information in your packets, but she has already served on the EFPBC for a number of years, and Mr. Nixon has worked with her and her expertise as well. This is a joint appointment by the Select Board, and this has also already been approved by the Select Board.
Can I say a word?
Yes, Mr. Nixon.
It's, the EFPBC is a great thing that town meeting established many years ago when we were doing an addition to McCall. It's what I think became the library edition. This is long before the E-Wing in 2009 or its addition 2 years ago. And that committee has grown over the years. So EFPBC has certain seats that are required, including one registered engineer, and that's the seat that Geetha has been serving for quite a few years. But what's really special about Geetha is that she is a geotechnical engineer. Geotech engineers are, I mean, they're civil engineers, but they have a real specialty, which is they understand the characteristics of soil. That's really important when we think about all sorts of foundation design, and not just for, you know, pilings or mat foundations, but we have utilities that cross our sites as well. And so at Winchester High School, which some will recall was the great sinking high school for years, we actually had utilities that were sinking. We had duct banks that were sinking at Winchester High School. And so she has been just super helpful in digging into some of the most fundamental elements of buildings, which, if not successful, can really lead to failure. I mean, really, a building is only as good as the foundation it sits on. And when I worked with her years ago on Vincent Owen, she was out there on site discovering that the site contractor was putting in some material that was not as specified. And she was right. And they had to come out and make some changes and sort of eat their words. So, you know, good for her. So she just is really committed. She's always showing up at the meeting. She reviews all the documents. It just brings really helpful expertise. So I'd be pleased to move that we reappoint Geetha Mathalayalakan as the engineer jointly with the Select Board on the EFPBC.
Just one other comment. It's particularly impressive if you looked at her resume. It says she's been on the EFPBC since 2004.
Yep.
So that's almost October, so she's coming up on 18 years. And so I think that's very impressive to have someone serve on a committee that long, knowing, you know, what's required of that committee, especially when building projects are going on. And she's served through a lot of building projects. So I just think it's important to acknowledge that. It's just so impressive, and so I certainly am very excited to reappoint her.
Okay. I think I heard a second already. So
Yep.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The vote is unanimous. So, and thank you for providing some context, Mr. Nixon. Let me just see. Next is consideration of acceptance of the Network for Social Justice micro grant for $1,225 for the high school. Dr. Elenema, can you summarize this for us?
Sure. So we were approved for two separate grants. One is a book group for teachers, and these have been very successful in this district, where people read a section, we talk through it, we ask what other questions we have, what research do we need to gather, and then it helps inform us of next steps in professional development as well. And then also a grant for a teacher to provide more text, diverse text in her classroom library, which is certainly something we've been working on as a district, and this is helpful because it's a middle school teacher, so it's bigger than just at one of our elementary schools. So,
Dr. Anelma, can I ask you just briefly about the first one a little bit? So one of the, as Dr. Hackett said, SEL has been a long-term initiative. I know that, you know, our work with now Teaching for Justice has also been a long-term initiative in the district. How does this fit in sort of with those goals that we're working towards? And that anti-bias and anti-racist education. I know there for a couple years have been some teachers that have been popping up that, like anything else, we have staff in all places in the continuum on their experience and their understanding of this, and have been asking for sort of a more deeper dive into some of this. They're ready for more. Is that what you're envisioning this as?
So, yeah, I think that may be true for some people. I mean, we try to keep everything open, wide
Yep.
open, and we won't limit it to the number of texts that we're getting from the grant. Jason and I met on it yesterday. So if we have more people interested, we will supplement the text for other people to take part. Lots of teachers buy the books themselves. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. I'm assuming you're talking about the book club one.
Yes, the book
Okay.
club. Sorry, yeah.
No, that's okay. And so one of the things we've been, like trying hard to do as a district is look at the whole SEL umbrella, which includes our anti-bias work, our work around the CASEL standards, our work with like the new social studies. They're not so new anymore, but they are because of pandemic. Standards, the big focus on civics. So we've been trying to bring those three pieces together because we just see such a connection between our students' social and emotional well-being connected to how we are around inclusiveness with all of these pieces. So the nice thing about this, Jason himself is going to run this to try to bring those pieces together. So for some teachers, it'll be extending and going deeper, and then for some teachers, it may be something that's new. They're just starting with it, and we try to model the differentiation of that's okay. But to your question of going deeper, I think is where you're going. We have some things in the works to really take this to a whole new level
Great.
going forward. So
Thank you.
maybe more grants to come.
Okay, I would accept a motion to accept this grant.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And yes, and thank you. And thank you to
Congrats.
the Network for Social Justice. Very exciting. Next, we have the consideration of acceptance of the Winchester Rotary Club grant for $2,000 for the high school music department. We did have some pictures from Mr. Buford and from Ms. Costello from the high school of how they have been used, or how this grant will be used. So our chamber singers from the high school have new uniforms that will be funded by this grant, and they are in red and black, and they had sent over some really nice pictures, so maybe they're available in the shared drive for you. So we are just grateful to the Rotary for funding these new uniforms.
Happy to move that we approve with gratitude a gift from the Winchester Rotary Club for $2,000 for the high school music department for uniforms.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The vote is unanimous. Next is the chair report, and I'll just say we're just starting to see the signs of spring here, and it's definitely a time of new beginnings and excitement as we turn toward the latter part of the school year, and with the exciting return of many school events and old and new traditions. So we've come a long way this year, but there is still much to do. There is daily news from the Ukraine, the confirmation of our Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and we're continuing to monitor the pandemic, and all of these just place us firmly in the context of history as it is unfolding. So I would just ask that we are mindful of those around us who may be in need, and that we all as a community just continue to be flexible and welcoming with all the new challenges and opportunities that are coming this way in this spring. And I will turn it over to Dr. Hackett. for
Well
our-
said, and I'm not going to follow that. That was an excellent, excellent. That's excellent comments. So.
Okay. We have future agenda items. So we have our school committee workshop coming up, and I think that we'll be discussing many of our norms and and I think, as we had said earlier, the direction that we want to go and the values that we see in our committee in this workshop. And then we have our next meetings. We do have a policy and a finance subcommittee meeting tomorrow afternoon. And then April 25th at 6:30 p.m., we will have a school committee meeting just prior to town meeting. We usually have that as just to discuss the articles that will be on the warrant for that evening for school committee, or over the course of town meeting.
Sorry, where are we going to have that meeting?
That is usually, since this year town meeting is in person, we will have it at the high school.
Okay,
So,
thank
and
you.
it's usually in one of the little side rooms.
Yep.
So we'll figure that out. I think there
Usually
is
a
a room.
conference room in the
Yeah.
A wing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I think
Aaron coordinated with
it's
Dennis.
coordinated, yeah. So then we will have a regularly scheduled school committee meeting on April 6th at 6 p.m., May 10th.
26th.
Oh, did I say the 6th?
Yeah.
April 26th, May 10th, and May 24th at 6 p.m. And that is all
So,
for this evening.
May I
Yes,
just have
Mr.
one
Nixon.
question, if I may, following up on Mr. Brady's comment, the assessment workshop series, if those are not gonna be held at 5 p.m., was there some discussion about maybe adding a special school committee meeting to talk about that? Not that we need to figure that out, but
To talk about when there would be, you mean, actually have the assessment
to
workshops?
I just,
Yes.
Yeah.
it's not clear what the plan is, that's all
Yes,
I'm saying.
well, because the plan's not clear, so you
Oh.
are right on target.
That's
we-
clear.
We'll talk about dates, and it was helpful tonight just to know, and I think
Okay.
separating from the regular workshop, regular meetings is a good idea. So
So-
we'll put some dates out and we'll coordinate.
Okay, if not a Tuesday, a Thursday is often like our backup.
Yep.
I know there's a lot going on, but I'm happy to come to a special meeting if we need to do that.
Yep. And if we're gonna do it separately, Dr. Allen, might we be able to cover 2 at a time? And do more of like an hour and 15, hour and a half?
Then maybe we could just stick to Tuesdays, do all Tuesdays in 1 month.
So I just would ask what your pleasure is, because covering K-12, everything we do, I don't want you to feel like you get too small of a soundbite of something from it and it's not thorough enough. So, however much time you set is certainly what we'll do. And just know what you can fit into that time. So,
Well,
My other thought was we're gonna have teachers as a part of this presentation, right?
for sure, there will be directors and coordinators.
Okay,
They may take videos and clips from teachers
okay,
as part of it. So,
okay.
I mean, they teach too. So yes. But
Well, but they have families too, and so I'm just
Right.
trying to think
Right.
about
Right.
what's the right window for them. Okay, well, keep us posted. Thank you.
terrific. With that, I would
Motion to
accept
adjourn.
a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
It's as if you read her mind.
All in
Oh.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And thank you to WinCam for your support as always, and to our audience and school committee members. There are warrants off to the side